Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and political leader of the People's National Movement, General Secretary of the People's National Movement, Chairman of the only true political party in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Franklin Can, Chairman of the People's National Movement, Councillor for the St. Lucian area. Yes, I have it. My cabinet colleagues, my parliamentary colleagues, ladies and gentlemen of the PNM, ladies and gentlemen of Trinidad and Tobago. It is always a good thing to be here in the Diego Martin area. Mainly because I was born here. Dr. Ollie, I know you didn't know I was a Diego Martinian by birth. I'm a Tobagonian by boat, but a Diego Martinian by birth. The constituencies of Diego Martin have served the PNM well. And they have given us MPs, the likes of Ken Valley, Norma Lewis-Phillip, Joe Lakis, all who bring a smile to our faces, Amy Brown, who is now ambassador to Brazil. And when I look at the current representation in these 3 seats, I see a mixture of youth, I see a blend of the experience, the new, the tall, the short, the slim, the not so slim. Indeed, I see real representation in these 3 constituencies. Constituencies that roam from the hills of Chariman to the valleys of Chaguaramas, from the bay at Macarip to the open waters of the Gulf of Paria. And this blend of constituencies has given us our Prime Minister, the one and only Keith Rowley. The 3 gentlemen, as I said, the tall and the not so tall. The 3 gentlemen who now represent this slice of our paradise, 2 for more than 20 years, and 1 who has just got his feet wet, are real politicians. Franklin Can always says that you all don't mind how our Minister of Finance might appear when he is in, I love you. When he is in his constituency, he is a horse of a different color. And ladies and gentlemen, there are those who want to masquerade in this constituency and pretend they could represent people. But we want to tell them, not here in Diego Martin. Diego Martin, the triumvirate, is the strength of the People's National Movement. PNM people, we are here on our path to progress. Our outreach to the people to let you know what is taking place in your government. We have stabilized the economy to a large extent, and now we are moving to progress to ensure that all the people of Trinidad and Tobago are well represented and feel the effects of a good government in place. Ladies and gentlemen, and those of you listening to us all over Trinidad and Tobago, I want to take this opportunity in the absence of my colleague, Darrell Smith, who is the Minister of Sport and Youth, to talk to you a bit about the sport policy that the chairman mentioned. And if we are to compare the 5-year track record of the UNC Sports Minister, Anil Roberts, with the track record of the 2.5 years of P&M Minister Darius Smith, it's like chalk and cheese. Anil Roberts will mostly be remembered for two things: live sport and the millions of dollars of corruption that went on there. Three things: live sport and the millions of dollars of corruption that went on there, room 201, and Tupul. I forgot Tupul. Under Darius Smith's stewardship, however, we have had the successful opening of the aquatic and cycling centers in Couva, the opening of the racket center in Tacarigua, and the opening of the Brian Lara Cricket Academy in Taruba. They tried all in their power for that cricket academy not to be opened. But under the astute guidance of the Honorable Prime Minister and the Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs, that cricket academy is open and in use. Under Darius Smith's stewardship, we have had some of the greatest accomplishments of our sportsmen and sportswomen. But the crowning piece thus far is the laying of the national sports policy in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. This sports policy for the period 2017 to 2020 is a framework for the development of sport and sport for development. That is what it is called. And the very important features of this sport policy I would like to outline to you this evening. And the first feature is the transition of the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago to the Sports Commission of Trinidad and Tobago. The intention behind this transition, which has long been championed by those in the world of sport, is to facilitate the adoption of a more business focus towards the development of sport in our country. The second feature is the development of a facility maintenance policy. This policy will be utilized to justify the much-needed funding in support of maintenance of all the facilities around the country, as well as the development of a preventative maintenance policy and a plan for all these sporting facilities. And you well know that in many instances, one of the banes of our development in Trinidad and Tobago, not just in sport, is our lack of maintenance of facilities. This policy is drafted in such a way to ensure that there is always funding for the maintenance of facilities. And I am sure that you are tired of hearing that this stadium isn't in use because the Mondo track needs to be resheeted, or another stadium cannot be in use. This policy is meant to ensure that maintenance is a consistent feature in the various stadia throughout Trinidad and Tobago. The third element of the sport policy, and this is an element that I'm sure will find resonance with athletes, is the development of an incentives and rewards framework. Prior to this period, Trinidad and Tobago has been without a formal policy guiding the award of rewards and incentives to national athletes and teams. The reward of our athletes was previously dependent upon the recommendations of whomsoever sat in the chair at the Ministry of Sport. This framework, which has been developed, provides a structure, and with it, it therefore eliminates ambiguity and inequity surrounding the award of incentives. And the incentive award is as follows, and I quote from the document. Olympic Games. Someone who wins a gold medal will be given $1 million. A silver medal, $500,000. And a bronze medal, $250,000. For the World Cup or World Championships, gold medal winners, $500,000, silver medal, $250,000, bronze medals, $150,000. The incentives and rewards framework also identifies rewards for junior athletes as well as para-athletes who medal at these high-level competitions. So ladies and gentlemen, in the next 4 years, I will definitely be a millionaire. What this really means, though, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is no longer going to be that guessing game, so that we know that this is what our athletes will be getting once they medal at these various games of international repute. And that is what I call the difference between UNC Anil Roberts and PNM Darrell Smith. We in the PNM have consistently warned you about the company that you keep. And we have seen lately that there are those in the UNC who are trying to create a rift in the PNM. They're trying to create that rift. You would recall that just last weekend, the Honorable Prime Minister made some statements at the distribution of keys at the HDC site in Viewfort Housing Project. And in his usual style, he teaches us when he speaks, in the same way that he always teaches us when he says something. And in that particular instance, he reminded the Minister of Housing, Randall Mitchell, that blame could not be cast solely on the UNC for the inordinate delay in the construction of those Viewfort houses, a 12-year delay, if I'm not mistaken. This misinformation fed then to the former Prime Minister about the $10 million, as some of you will recall, led to a virtual halt of the ministry's work on that site. This information that came out at the Viewfort handing over led to a press release from our former cabinet colleague and wife of the then Prime Minister, Mr. Patrick Manning. As I said at that time, and I'm saying it again, the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, never blamed or criticized Mr. Manning. As he said, Mr. Manning was never a minister of housing. His focus was on the bad advice given to Mr. Manning by the then Minister of Housing. But you know what was really amazing is how quickly some of Mr. and Mrs. Manning's staunchest critics, their staunchest critics were quick to jump into PNM business. I wonder if you all recall how Kamala and her cohorts used to say all of the worst things about Patrick Manning. You all recall that? I wouldn't even repeat it. I would not even repeat it, what they used to be saying. But now they jump into Mrs. Manning's defense, jump into Mr. Manning's defense. I wonder if you all recall how much they had to say when Mrs. Manning was Minister of Education, when she was Minister of Local Government. What they didn't say about her, they forget. Now all of them lining up to be her best friend. But I know that Mrs. Manning is much more intelligent than that. But what it demonstrates to us in the PNM is the hypocrisy of those political assassins. And Rudal Munilal should be the last person who should be giving anyone advice. You all recall his advice that he gave to Kamala when she was going up for leadership, when he was against her? Keep walking, Kamala. And I understand her response was, when you see a gray goose walking, call me. Rudal Munilal, ladies and gentlemen, was the worst housing minister in Trinidad and Tobago. Under his watch at the Ministry of Housing and the Environment, CPEP started to build community centers. CPEP started to do hospital refurbishment. The ministry started to rent luxury cars. And I won't tell you from whom, you all have to try and remember whose name was calling that. Some people call him Breadfruit Head. But you all try and remember who that is who was renting the luxury cars. And I want you all to take a walk down memory lane as I talk to you for a little bit about the issue involving Eden Gardens. And I'm going to quote from a letter from the Joint Consultative Council for the Construction Industry to the Registrar General about the Eden Gardens issue. And it says, and I quote, "This report is of two serious frauds in respect of Eden Gardens at Freeport. Two serious frauds. One, stamp duty fraud on the Board of Inland Revenue in the respect of a transfer of valuable lands at a substantial undervalue in the order of 1/10 of the true value. And two, the overpayment for those lands by the Housing Development Corporation of the order of 5 times the maximum price the state could lawfully have paid. 5 times the price paid by HDC. The HDC paid $175 million for that land in Eden Gardens in November 2012, which could have been lawfully acquired for $35 million. They paid $175 for land that could have been lawfully acquired for $35 million. And this, ladies and gentlemen, occurred under the stewardship of Rudal Munilal. So, ladies and gentlemen, let Rudal Munilal stop talking and giving us advice. But if that wasn't bad enough, we also had the construction cost of lots at EMBD sites, all under Rudal Munilal's tenure. And I just want to refer to those issues. Under the Cypress Gardens site, which was done by sole selective tendering, which means only one person was called in to tender for this. The contract, which should have been in the order of just over $5 million, we paid $1.6 billion in contract. $500 million. We ended up paying $1.6 billion. On the Oasis site, again, a sole selective tender. That site cost us $1.3 billion, ladies and gentlemen. We also have residential sites where there was no statutory approvals. So the Reform Village site, there was no regional corporation final approval. That is, Princestown Regional Corporation was supposed to approve that. And 474 lots are undersized and don't have the County Medical Officer of Health approval. The Woodland site, no approval from WASA, Fire, the regional corporation, and that's the Pinal de Bay Regional Corporation. The site at Rupsing Road, Phase 1, $109,000 per lot, which is what it would have cost under the PNM. Under the UNC, it cost us $879,000 per lot. The Exchange site, Phase 1, again, $109,000 per lot under the PNM. Under the UNC, $310,000 per lot to $399,000 per lot. The Pitimon site, under the UNC, the lots were $1.177 million per lot. In Picton, the price of the lots was $735,000 per lot under the UNC. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have met is a travesty. And you will recall that regarding the EMBD issue, this matter is engaging the attention of the courts as a civil matter. And as our Prime Minister always said, even though some of these matters have been reported to the police, and certainly the one involving Eden Gardens was reported to the police, we cannot instruct the police on how to act. But where we can take civil action, we have been doing that, ladies and gentlemen. But ladies and gentlemen, one thing that I want to bring to your attention whilst I am here is the issue of Chagaramas. Some of you may recall that when we came into government, and even before we came into government, there were issues involving the land at Chagaramas. There was a situation where certain leases had been given at a very low rate, and for areas of Chagaramas that were not set aside for that purpose. So the situation was that there is a 1974 policy which defines the land use for the Chagaramas area. It is the only approved policy because for the Chagaramas land use to be approved, it has to be approved by the cabinet, and it also has to be approved by the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. What took place under the last administration, under the stewardship of the then Minister of Planning and Development, Bo Tiwari, was an attempt to do a new Chaguaramas land use policy. But what was interesting about that was that the policy came about after leases had been given to various leaseholders, so that they made a policy to suit the leases that they already gave. So it wasn't a genuine policy. It was a policy to suit the leases that they gave. Two things. That policy was not taken to the cabinet. The second thing, that policy never saw the light of day at the Parliament. And those are two things that had to occur for the policy to be accepted as a policy for the Chaguaramas land use. Your government, upon coming into office, has been able, through legal advice, to move toward renegotiating some of those leases and also to taking back some of those lands that were given without proper authority. And one of the main things that I want to bring to your attention, some of you marched with us or walked with us to Chaguaramas. You all remember that? Because of what was taking place with regard to the farmers at Chaguaramas. You're welcome. One person had got approximately 100 hectares, 100 acres of land down at Chaguaramas. One person. Joe Paris. Yes, one person. And ladies and gentlemen, under the guidance of the Prime Minister, under the guidance of the Minister of Planning and Development, you all know who that is, and under the guidance of the Board of Chaguaramas, we have been able to retake approximately half of that land, and we are now developing it for the Chaguaramas farmers. We are now developing that for the Chaguaramas farmers. We have also ensured that the leases that were not legal, we have gone to our attorneys at law and we are working to ensure that those leases can be taken back or renegotiated. Ladies and gentlemen, our government is working in the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We are not about working in the interests of one group or of one person or of ourselves. Our interest is your interest. Our interest is to ensure that you get what you deserve as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And ladies and gentlemen, I ask you tonight, if each one of us makes a commitment every day to take care of our interests and the interests of our country, Trinidad and Tobago will be one of the greatest countries in this hemisphere and in the world. I am of the firm view that we will see the turnaround which we so earnestly work for. And as we enter the celebration of Holy Week and Easter, I want to take this opportunity to wish the entire country best wishes for a happy and holy Easter. And I am reminded of a saying which often says and which is often used to say that no Good Friday lasts forever. There will always be a Resurrection Sunday. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you.
Oh Lord, I said this is the year for love.